The story begins with a lady named Lydia, who in real life could experience ghosts. Lydia could see all the ghosts around her, and she communicated with them, often making them do things for her. She even started a show where she performed magic tricks, visiting people's homes to capture ghosts and spirits and bring them along. One day, while Lydia was talking to a family, she suddenly noticed a ghost sitting in the audience. This ghost's name was Beetle, and for some reason, Lydia got disturbed by it. She quickly ended the show and went to the restroom, feeling uneasy and on the verge of a panic attack. To avoid that, she had started taking some pills a few years ago, as the number of ghosts around her had been increasing. Then, we see Rory, Lydia's assistant, coming to her. He and Lydia used to run the show together. When Rory saw her taking the pills, he immediately took them away, as they were not good for her health. They then shared a long kiss, revealing that they were in a girlfriend-boyfriend relationship. Soon after, Lydia received messages from her mother, calling her urgently. Without wasting any time, Lydia went to her mother to find out what happened. Her mother informed her that her father had passed away in a plane crash. The crash resulted in a water landing, and tragically, a shark ate him. This news left Lydia devastated. After that, we see a man walking on the road when suddenly his foot falls into a tunnel, and he dies from a severe injury. This man had done some bad things in his life, which caused him to end up in the world of ghosts. The place was strange, and as the man moved forward, he saw the ghost of an old man, who used to clean and arrange things there. While the old man was arranging some boxes, he made a mistake, causing the boxes to fall. Inside one of the boxes, there was another ghost named Danan, who was incredibly powerful. Her body had been separated and hidden, but soon Danan began to staple her body parts back together. Within moments, she was fully restored to her original form. She immediately approached the old man's ghost and demanded to know where Beetle could be found. The old man didn't know anything about Beetle, which made Danan furious. Using her powers, she absorbed the old man's soul, killing him in the process. The skin of the old man fell off, revealing that Danan had the ability to absorb the energy of ghosts, effectively killing them. Meanwhile, in the human world, we meet a girl named Estee, who goes to school. We learn that Estee is none other than Lydia's daughter. Lydia had been trying to call Estee repeatedly, but Estee was very angry with her mother. Lydia was so busy with ghosts and spirits that she had no time for Estee. After Lydia's father passed away, she decided to visit Estee and tell her the news. Back in the world of ghosts, Beetle, whom Danan was looking for to kill, is confronted by Frank, a ghost world police officer. Frank's job is to capture bad ghosts and punish them. Frank shows Beetle a picture of Danan, and when Beetle sees her, he becomes obsessed with her, thinking she's a very beautiful ghost. But Frank warns Beetle that Danan has the ability to absorb souls, and she is hunting him to kill him. Beetle is shocked and scared by this revelation, unsure of what to do next. Meanwhile, Lydia meets Estee, who is deeply mourning the death of her grandfather. Estee is crying uncontrollably, overwhelmed by the news of his death. Estee was still very angry with her mom and dad. Everyone gathered for Lydia's father's funeral to pay their respects. Estee had always been alone, even though her parents were present. Lydia had been so busy with her work that she didn't give Estee proper attention. But slowly, Estee began to recover. Meanwhile, Beetle was telling people his story. He explained that many years ago, a dangerous disease had spread, and many people were dying because of it. During that time, he met a lady named Danan. Together, they developed a solution to cure the virus, and they even created an antidote. They distributed it far and wide, and both enjoyed their work together. But one night, Danan secretly poisoned Beetle's drink, nearly killing him. Beetle realized that Danan wanted to kill him, so he used his powers to dismember Danan and hide her body forever. Now, Danan had returned and was determined to find Beetle and take revenge on him. This was why she was relentlessly hunting him down. Back at Lydia's house, after her father's death, everyone was feeling down. Estee was still very angry with Lydia, but then, Lydia's boyfriend, Rory, surprised everyone by announcing that he was going to marry Lydia. He made this announcement in front of the people attending the funeral. Estee was shocked by this and couldn't believe what she had just heard. But Lydia and Rory confirmed the news with a kiss. Estee was furious, so she picked up her bicycle and left. She was extremely frustrated because it felt like everything was going wrong for her. While riding her bike, she lost her balance and swerved off track to avoid colliding with a car. She ended up crashing into a tree. Fortunately, she didn't get seriously injured. Just then, a boy named Jeremy, who was in a treehouse, approached Estee and started talking to her like a friend. Estee, feeling a bit better, was happy to see Jeremy's kind behavior. She trusted him and shared her feelings, opening up about everything that was bothering her. Jeremy reassured her that whenever she needed to talk, she could come to him, and he would always be there. Meanwhile, Beetle was watching the news, where they mentioned the death of Richard, Lydia's father. There seemed to be some connection to this, and Beetle started making his way towards Lydia's family. Back at Lydia's house, her entire family, including Estee, was gathered. Lydia and her family had returned to Richard's old house, a place that held many memories. This house was the last reminder of her father, and Lydia was keen on decorating it beautifully. Estee, too, wandered around the house and found herself in her grandfather's old room, exploring the space. In the basement, Estee discovered a large area where a mini-world had been created. Everything inside this world was tiny, and as Estee looked around, she found an old form with Beetle's name on it. She also found photo albums of Richard and his family. Estee began looking through them, and soon Lydia joined her. They were enjoying the photos, but as soon as Lydia saw the form with Beetle's name on it, she immediately pulled Estee away and warned her never to go near Beetle. Estee, feeling a bit down, decided to leave and went straight to Jeremy's house. Jeremy was happy to see Estee and they started talking. However, when they entered Jeremy's house, Estee noticed that his parents weren't speaking to her for some unknown reason. Jeremy then took Estee straight to his room, where they continued to talk and share their thoughts. Jeremy suggests to Estee that there's a Halloween party coming up, and if she wants, she can join him. Estee is thrilled about the idea but says she will check with her mother, Lydia, first. There's a subtle hint that Estee might have feelings for Jeremy, and Jeremy seems to feel the same, but neither of them is ready to admit it yet. Meanwhile, Rory is persistently urging Lydia to marry him, but Lydia is distracted by something else. She begins receiving multiple messages on her phone, all from Beetle. Seeing these messages, Rory questions Lydia, and in her frustration, Lydia finally admits the truth. She tells Rory that many years ago, she was married to Beetle, but he was involved in some wrongdoings, which led to his death. However, Lydia believes that after dying, Beetle became a ghost, and now he's trying to find a way to bring her back to the ghost world and live with him. Rory doesn't take Lydia's explanation seriously and thinks she's joking. But Lydia insists that if they say Beetle's name 3 times, they will be transported to the ghost world. Rory, treating it like a joke, says Beetle's name 3 times, and both of them are teleported to the ghostly realm, where Beetle is waiting. Beetle, seeing Lydia, laughs and calls her his darling. Using his powers, he silences Lydia to prevent her from saying home and returning to the human world. To prove his control, Beetle makes Lydia pregnant, and within a second, a miniature version of Beetle is born, also with an evil nature. Rory is completely confused about what's happening, but Lydia manages to remove the thread Beetle used to silence her and says home, teleporting both of them back to the human world. Before leaving, Beetle warns Lydia that if she doesn't return to him, many people will have to die as a consequence. Lydia continues to try to explain things to Rory, but he's still in shock from everything he just witnessed. Lydia decides that they cannot stay in this house anymore, as it's full of memories related to Beetle. She tells her mother and Estee that they must sell the house and move into a new one. However, Estee convinces Lydia to stay until Halloween because she wants to go to a party with a nice guy. Lydia sees Estee genuinely happy for the first time in a long time, and in the meantime, she locks Beetle's room and her husband's room to prevent anyone from going inside. Finally, Halloween night arrives. Lydia drops Estee off at Jeremy's place, where they'll head to the party. But Lydia can't shake off the worry about Beetle because, knowing him, if anyone gets in his way, he won't hesitate to kill them. When Estee arrives at Jeremy's room, he suggests they have the Halloween party in their room instead. Estee is confused, but then Jeremy approaches her and starts kissing her. Estee enjoys it, but when she opens her eyes, she realizes they are floating in the air. She quickly pulls away from him and comes down to the ground, only to discover that Jeremy is a ghost. Jeremy admits that he is indeed a ghost, revealing that a few months ago, his parents had been abusive, and in anger, he climbed a tree. He fell and died from the injuries. The twist is that only Estee can see him, as she inherited her mother's ability to see and help ghosts. Jeremy asks Estee for help, explaining that if she reads a spell from a book, he could come back to life. He insists that Estee is the only one he can trust. Estee is shocked by the revelation, but Jeremy's words seem convincing to her, and she starts to believe he may be telling the truth. Lydia and her mother visit a lawyer friend to sell the old property. After signing the documents, the lawyer asks where Estee is. Lydia proudly mentions that Estee is on her first date with a girl. However, when the lawyer hears the name Jeremy, she becomes concerned and warns Lydia that Estee is in great danger. She explains that Jeremy is already dead, he killed his family members in a fit of stress and then took his own life. This revelation alarms Lydia, and she quickly rushes to Jeremy's house to check on Estee. Meanwhile, Jeremy has created a portal to another world and is manipulating Estee to read a spell that would help him come back to life. When Lydia arrives at Jeremy's house, she sees that Jeremy's parents are also ghosts. Before Lydia can save him, Jeremy takes Estee with him into the alternate world. Lydia tries everything to stop them, even looking through spell books, but she struggles to find a solution. Lydia's mother is also shown performing a ritual to bring Lydia's late husband Richard back to life. However, during the ritual, snakes emerge and bite her, killing her on the spot. Lydia, now terrified for her daughter's safety, is desperate to save Estee. She decides to go directly to Beetle for help. After calling Beetle 3 times, he appears before her. Lydia promises Beetle that if he saves Estee, she will marry him. Beetle, overjoyed by this offer, quickly drafts an agreement, and Lydia signs it. Beetle then enters the ghost world, and as soon as he does, many ghosts become fearful upon seeing him because of his dangerous reputation. In the ghost world, an opening has been created, allowing numerous ghosts to enter the human world. As they emerge, people are terrified and run away in fear. Meanwhile, Jeremy, having brought Estee into the ghost world, reveals that due to the spell Estee had read, he now possesses her body. He plans to transfer his soul into her body and take over her life in the human world. Estee remains unaware of the betrayal as she is captured by Jeremy. However, Estee sees her father, Richard, who is now a ghost. He attempts to help her, and Lydia, along with Beetle, begins searching for Estee. The ghosts, now carrying Estee, board a train, and Lydia sees this. She rushes into the ghostly crowd and manages to pull Estee out, but in the chaos, they end up on a wrong path that leads them to a desolate desert area full of enormous snakes. The snakes attack them, but Richard arrives just in time to save them. Richard warns them that there are many spirits in this place that will try to kill them. He guides Lydia and Estee on the correct path to return to the human world. Back in the human world, Beetle has punished Jeremy, sending him to hell. With Richard's help, Lydia and Estee finally return to the human world and find themselves in a graveyard. Lydia suddenly remembers that she is supposed to marry Rory today. When she arrives, Beetle appears before her, reminding her of the agreement she made. He presents the signed contract, and Lydia now faces the consequences of her promise. Beetle injects Rory with a serum, forcing him to tell the truth, which leads to a tense and dramatic moment for Lydia as her past decisions collide with her present. The story reaches its climax when Rory finally admits to Lydia that he doesn't love her but is only after her wealth, intending to take her property if they marry. This revelation causes Lydia to hate Rory. As Beetle moves forward with his plan to marry Lydia, he uses his powers to trap everyone in their phones, wanting to keep the wedding private. Just as everything seems to be going according to Beetle's plan, Officer Frank and his team, who specialize in capturing escaped ghosts, arrive at the scene. They try to apprehend Beetle, but Beetle fights back using his powers. In the chaos, Danan shows up, also wanting to marry Beetle and kill him in the process. Estee, in an attempt to help, finds a book that enables her to summon a sandworm, which attacks and kills Danan. Beetle, undeterred, shows Lydia the marriage agreement and forces her to marry him. However, Estee calls Beetle's name 3 times, causing Beetle to explode instead of returning to the ghost world, ultimately leading to his death. With Beetle's demise, everything returns to normal. Lydia and Estee begin a peaceful life together, and a few years later, Estee marries a man and has children. But when Estee's child is born, it turns out to be a small, evil version of Beetle, who kills doctors. However, this is revealed to be just a nightmare of Lydia's, as Estee is now living independently without any worries. The story concludes with Lydia and Estee finally free from Beetle's haunting presence. The viewers are left with a sense of relief, as the terrifying events unfold and resolve, and the story ends on a hopeful note with Lydia and Estee's future bright.